Welcome to the hidden corridors of the human mind. In this video, you'll be taken on a journey into the unsettling world of manipulation. This isn't about tricks or party games. This is about real-world tactics used by master manipulators often, in plain sight, to control others, dominate social environments, and rewrite realities. You might think manipulation is easy to detect, that it only happens in relationships with narcissists or sociopaths. But what if I told you that manipulation lives all around us, in ads, in workplaces, in families, even in love? And what if I told you you've likely used these techniques yourself? To help you grasp the depth of these concepts, we've broken everything down into clearly defined chapters, each one peeling back another layer of the psychological mask manipulators wear. This structured approach ensures you can follow along, reflect, and truly absorb the meaning behind every tactic. Each chapter reveals techniques grounded in real psychological theory from the studies of Freud, Skinner, Cialdini, and modern behaviorists. And every single method is still being used right now. This isn't about endorsing manipulation. It's about exposing it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you learn how it works, you'll never be a pawn again. Before we begin, let me ask you something. Are you ready to see the world and yourself through a darker, sharper lens? If so, this journey isn't one you'll want to forget. So do yourself a favor, subscribe to this channel right now, not just because it helps us, but because this rabbit hole goes deeper, and the next time manipulation tries to creep into your life, you'll already be 10 steps ahead. Let's begin. Chapter 1. What is dark psychology? Dark psychology is the shadow lurking beneath the surface of every social interaction. It's not taught in schools or mentioned in polite conversation, yet it drives some of the most powerful, unsettling behaviors in human history. At its core, dark psychology is the art and science of manipulation, control, coercion, and deception. It is a realm of psychology that explores how people use psychological tactics not to heal or help, but to dominate and exploit. The term may sound dramatic, something torn from the pages of a psychological thriller or whispered in secret meetings. But dark psychology exists all around us, often unnoticed. It's the smooth-talking con artist convincing someone to hand over their savings, the emotionally abusive partner twisting love into a leash, the cult leader who slowly erodes independent thought, the boss who gaslights employees into silence, or even the influencer exploiting fears to sell empty solutions. In all these cases, the objective is control, seizing power over thoughts, emotions, and decisions without permission. Unlike traditional psychology, which aims to understand and improve the human mind, dark psychology seeks to uncover how it can be used against itself. It's not a formally recognized branch in academic psychology, but rather a fusion of theories drawn from psychoanalysis, behaviorism, persuasion studies, and criminal psychology. Figures like Freud explored unconscious drives that shape behavior, while B.F. Skinner demonstrated how reinforcement could control action. Machiavelli wrote centuries earlier about the necessity of fear, deception, and manipulation for rulers to maintain power. These were not isolated theories. They were blueprints for control. What makes dark psychology so potent is that it thrives in everyday situations. You don't have to be a master criminal to use it or fall victim to it. It hides behind charming smiles, flattering words, or tearful pleas. It wears the mask of concern, romance, authority, or even friendship. Manipulators often don't storm the gates of your mind. They're invited in, posing as someone you trust. And that's the greatest danger. They use your trust against you, often without you realizing it until it's too late. The power of dark psychology lies in its subtlety. You're not forced to believe something. You're gently nudged over time to question yourself, to crave approval, to fear rejection. The manipulator doesn't always shout. Often they whisper. And by the time you notice, you've already changed. Your opinions, your values, your confidence, reshaped in ways you can't fully explain. You begin to wonder if you're imagining things. You doubt your instincts. You second-guess your reality. That confusion isn't a side effect. It's the goal. Yet manipulation is not inherently complex. It works because human beings are, in many ways, predictable. We crave love. We avoid pain. We want to belong. We fear abandonment. The person who understands these needs can exploit them, and often does. Whether in a toxic relationship or a media campaign, the formula remains the same. Trigger emotions, bypass logic, and make the victim believe it was their choice all along. One of the most disturbing aspects of dark psychology is that it can be used in both macro and micro environments. A single person can manipulate a partner, and a government can manipulate millions. Propaganda, misinformation, cult mindsets, and even marketing strategies can all tap into the same core techniques. What changes is the scale. The intent remains constant. Control, whether for personal gain, power consolidation, or financial profit. What makes these techniques especially insidious is their ability to bypass conscious awareness. You might feel emotionally drained after a conversation and not realize it's because someone subtly undermined your self-worth. You might believe a choice was yours, not realizing how carefully you were herded to that conclusion through emotionally manipulative language. It feels like free will, but it isn't. It's architecture, designed from the inside out. Some of the most effective manipulators are those who believe they're doing good. They convince themselves they're helping, guiding, or protecting others. But the truth is, intent doesn't undo the manipulation. It just makes it harder to recognize. When someone claims they know what's best for you, especially without your input, you should pause. Because manipulation wrapped in concern is still manipulation. It's easy to paint manipulators as villains, but that's an oversimplification. Everyone manipulates to some extent. Children cry to get their way. Adults exaggerate to avoid punishment. Couples guilt-trip each other out of fear or insecurity. The line between influence and exploitation is blurry and often crossed unknowingly. This is why understanding dark psychology isn't just about defending yourself from others. It's also about examining your own behavior. The moment we realize we're all capable of manipulation is the moment we start practicing ethical awareness. We begin asking harder questions. Am I using this information to help or control? Am I listening to someone or steering them? Am I giving them space to think or boxing their mind into submission? Once you understand how these tactics work, you begin to see them everywhere. In politics, dark psychology is used to sow division, evoke fear, and engineer consent. In advertising, it's used to create insecurities that can only be resolved by buying a product. In toxic relationships, it's used to erode identity and keep someone submissive. It's subtle, it's strategic, and it's deadly effective. This chapter is your invitation to the dark side, not to join it, but to understand it. Because understanding brings power. You'll no longer fall for the love bomb that precedes the emotional cage. You'll spot the pattern in words meant to disorient. You'll feel the manipulation before it settles in your bones. And most importantly, you'll be able to protect not just yourself, but those around you. The following chapters will go deeper, much deeper, into the minds of those who manipulate, the tools they use, and the environments that allow them to thrive. This isn't just education, it's psychological armor. So don't look away, because the most dangerous manipulation is the one you never see coming. Chapter 2. The Triad of Dark Personality Types. In the realm of dark psychology, certain personality types are particularly prone to manipulation, and not just as victims, but as the orchestrators. These are individuals who don't just flirt with control, they live for it. To truly understand how manipulation works, we must dive into the minds of those who master it with chilling precision. Psychology has a name for them: the Dark Triad. The Dark Triad refers to a trio of personality traits, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, that when combined or present in extremes create the perfect storm for manipulation. These individuals aren't necessarily criminals or villains in the traditional sense. Many of them walk among us as leaders, lovers, influencers, or even friends. But behind the facade lies something more calculating. Let's begin with narcissism. A narcissist craves attention, admiration, and validation. But unlike mere vanity, this isn't just surface-level self-love. It's an unquenchable thirst for superiority, driven by a fragile ego. Narcissists manipulate by charm, by flattery, by creating an illusion of perfection. They draw people in, not by brute force, but by making others believe they're lucky to be in their presence. They seduce through fantasy, and once you're hooked, they begin to shape your behavior to meet their needs. Your praise becomes their fuel. Your opinions, irrelevant, unless they serve their self-image. Then there are the Machiavellians, named after Niccolò Machiavelli, whose writings on power remain infamous. These individuals are cold, strategic, and cynical. Unlike narcissists, they don't necessarily seek attention. They seek results. They are social chess players, several moves ahead, always observing, always planning. Machiavellians manipulate by withholding information, controlling narratives, and weaponizing trust. They don't need to be liked. They need to win, and they will sacrifice relationships, emotions, and even morals if it serves the goal. Finally, there is psychopathy. Psychopaths are often portrayed in media as serial killers or criminals, but in reality, many live quietly in society. What defines them is a lack of empathy, remorse, or genuine emotional connection. They manipulate with ease because they feel no guilt. They can lie without blinking, hurt without hesitation, and deceive without the burden of conscience. Their actions are not clouded by emotion. They are driven by impulse, desire, and dominance. These three traits, when present alone, already make for dangerous manipulators. But when two or more exist in a single person, manipulation becomes second nature. For example, a narcissist who is also Machiavellian may charm their way into your life while plotting your emotional downfall. A psychopathic Machiavellian may run entire corporate empires, unbothered by the human cost of their decisions. These individuals don't see others as people. They see them as pieces. What's more terrifying is how these dark triad traits are often rewarded by society. Narcissists can become celebrities. Machiavellians climb political ladders. Psychopaths thrive in high-stakes environments like finance, law, or executive roles. Their lack of fear, their calculated detachment, their ruthless ambition, it makes them seem powerful, even admirable, to those who don't look too closely. Manipulation becomes not just a means to survive, but a strategy to succeed. But there's another layer to this triad, the impact they leave behind. Victims of dark triad individuals often report long-term psychological trauma, gaslighting, confusion, diminished self-esteem, and emotional paralysis. These manipulators don't just control, they dismantle. They restructure how their victims see the world, themselves, and others. And they do it so skillfully that victims often blame themselves. Understanding the dark triad is essential if you want to spot manipulation before it traps you, because these individuals rarely show their full nature at first. They mask their intentions with charm, intelligence, and calculated vulnerability. A narcissist might pretend to care deeply. A Machiavellian might feign loyalty. A psychopath might mirror your emotions, but it's all part of the manipulation script, designed to disarm you. So, how do you spot them? You don't look for what they say. You watch what they do when no one's watching. You pay attention to how they treat people they don't need. You note how they respond to failure, criticism, or boundaries. Most importantly, you listen to your intuition. Because even if your mind is fooled, your body often isn't. That uneasy feeling, that tension in your chest, that's your warning. We all have moments of selfishness. We all have impulses. But when manipulation becomes a lifestyle, when people become tools and feelings become weapons, you're no longer dealing with a flawed human. You're dealing with a predator. In the next chapter, we'll begin unpacking the specific manipulation techniques these personalities use to maintain their control. Techniques so subtle, so practiced, that you might not even realize they're being used on you. But now, you'll know what to look for. Chapter 3. The Subtle Art of Gaslighting. There is a form of psychological manipulation so quiet, so insidious, that it can unravel a person's identity without them ever noticing. It doesn't involve shouting, threats, or overt control. Instead, it whispers. It rewrites memories. It questions realities. This technique is called gaslighting, a term borrowed from a 1938 stage play and popularized by the 1944 film Gaslight, where a man slowly manipulates his wife into believing she is going insane by dimming the gaslights and denying they ever changed. It may sound like fiction, but in truth, gaslighting is one of the most destructive manipulation tactics ever used, and it happens more often than you think. Gaslighting works by destabilizing the victim's sense of truth. It starts subtly. A missed phone call someone swears never came through. A comment you clearly remember, now denied. An event you witnessed, now reframed as a misunderstanding. The manipulator chips away at your certainty, replacing your reality with theirs. And they do it so convincingly, so calmly, that you begin to wonder if you're the one who's wrong. If maybe, just maybe, your memory can't be trusted. The genius and the horror of gaslighting is that it preys on something fundamental to all of us, our need to understand the world and our place in it. We all rely on memory and perception to navigate life. Take those away, and you're left adrift. You question your instincts. You second-guess your decisions. You apologize for things you didn't do. The gaslighter thrives in this confusion because every doubt you have makes you more dependent on them. Gaslighting doesn't usually begin with overt deception. It begins with trust. The gaslighter presents themselves as rational, caring, even wise. They might say things like, "You're just stressed," or "I think you misunderstood," or "That never happened, maybe you were dreaming." They don't scream. They calmly suggest. And over time, these suggestions become your new reality. You start to believe their version of events more than your own. This tactic is especially dangerous in intimate relationships. Romantic partners, close, friends, even parents can use gaslighting to assert control. They isolate the victim, not physically, but mentally. The victim stops seeking validation from others because they're embarrassed, ashamed, or afraid of sounding paranoid. They think, maybe it's just me, and the gaslighter ensures it stays that way. In abusive relationships, gaslighting becomes a tool of emotional imprisonment. The victim might say, "You hurt me," and the gaslighter replies, "You're being too sensitive." The victim might catch the abuser lying, and the abuser will say, "You always twist things." After enough of this, the victim begins to apologize for being hurt, for asking questions, for existing. The abuser never has to raise their voice. They've already won the war for the victim's mind. But gaslighting isn't confined to personal relationships. It appears in workplaces, where bosses rewrite expectations and blame employees for failures that never existed. It exists in politics, where leaders deny reality, calling facts fake, rewriting history, reframing cruelty as necessity. It appears in cults and extremist groups, where entire communities are taught to doubt everything except the voice of their leader. In all these environments, gaslighting serves the same purpose: control through confusion. What makes gaslighting uniquely effective is that it weaponizes one of the most human qualities: self-doubt. Most of us are willing to question ourselves. We assume we can make mistakes. We strive to be fair, balanced, and reasonable. The gaslighter exploits this humility. They don't try to fight your certainty. They simply make you less certain, and over time, you begin to lean on them to make sense of the world. Spotting gaslighting requires clarity and courage. It starts with listening to your discomfort. If someone constantly makes you feel confused, inferior, or irrational, especially when you raise concerns, there's a chance they're gaslighting you. If you find yourself apologizing too often or feeling like you're walking on eggshells, take a step back. Reflect. Ask others for their perspective. Trust your instincts. Countering gaslighting is not easy. It often requires removing yourself from the manipulator's sphere. In some cases, it demands rebuilding your sense of self from the ground up, through therapy, journaling, honest friendships, and time. But healing is possible, and the first step is recognition. Because the moment you realize someone is trying to rewrite your reality is the moment they lose their grip. In the next chapter, we'll examine another sinister manipulation method, one that often follows gaslighting: love bombing and trauma bonding. Together, they form a psychological trap that can feel like love, but functions like a cage. Chapter 4: Love bombing and trauma bonding. Love should feel safe, comforting, real. But in the hands of a manipulator, love becomes a weapon, one that wraps its victims in warmth, only to shackle them with invisible chains. Two of the most powerful and intertwined tools in dark psychology are love bombing and trauma bonding. They appear like opposites, one flooding a person with affection, the other trapping them in cycles of pain. But together, they form a devastating psychological prison, hard to escape and harder to recognize. Love bombing is the storm before the silence. It is the sudden, overwhelming affection designed to pull someone in quickly, intensely, and without question. Imagine meeting someone who showers you with attention, compliments, gifts, promises of forever, all in the span of days or weeks. You feel seen, cherished, chosen. They make you believe you've finally found the one. It feels like a dream, but it's not love. It's bait. The manipulator's goal with love bombing is simple: emotional dependency. By flooding you with dopamine and oxytocin, the brain's love chemicals, they create a powerful bond. Your brain associates this person with euphoria, with safety, with purpose. And just when you're fully invested, just when you've lowered your defenses and handed over trust, the switch flips, the attention fades, the warmth cools, criticism replaces compliments, distance replaces intimacy. You're left confused, wondering what went wrong. And then, just when you feel ready to walk away, they return, with an apology, with another dose of love bombing, a grand gesture, a romantic moment, a teary confession. And you stay, because you remember the high, and you believe it can return. This is where trauma bonding begins. Trauma bonding is the attachment formed through repeated cycles of abuse and reward. It's not logical, it's chemical, emotional. It's what happens when your brain is trained to expect pain, but still craves the pleasure. You become addicted to the manipulator, not despite the abuse, but because of the pattern. You feel helpless when they hurt you, but euphoric when they come back. Over time, the pain and the pleasure merge, and that's the trap. In trauma bonds, victims often blame themselves. They rationalize the abuse. They're just stressed. I was too emotional. They love me. They're just not perfect. The manipulator reinforces this, alternating between cruelty and affection so effectively that the victim begins to doubt their own standards. What used to be unacceptable now feels normal. What once was healthy now feels boring. The manipulator becomes the center of the victim's emotional universe, and leaving them feels like tearing out a part of your soul. What makes love bombing and trauma bonding so effective is their ability to bypass logic. Even intelligent, self-aware people can fall into these cycles, because it's not about intelligence, it's about need. We all want to be loved. We all want to feel special. The manipulator identifies these needs and uses them like keys to open the doors of your mind. These techniques are common in toxic romantic relationships, but they can also occur in friendships, families, and cults. A friend who constantly praises you then suddenly withdraws and punishes you with silence. A parent who dotes on you then lashes out in anger, only to apologize with gifts. A leader who calls you chosen, only to isolate and berate you later. In every case, the emotional roller coaster creates dependency, and dependency leads to control. To break a trauma bond is to break a cycle of addiction. It requires distance, support, and a brutal honesty with yourself. You must acknowledge that the highs were part of the manipulation, that the person who loves you may never have truly seen you, that love without consistency is not love at all. It's control. Healing from love bombing and trauma bonding isn't just about walking away. It's about rebuilding your sense of self. You must relearn what real love feels like: calm, consistent, respectful. You must question your emotional reflexes. You must sit with the pain of separation, knowing it's the path to clarity. And, above all, you must remember, the fact that you were manipulated does not make you weak. It makes you human. In the next chapter, we'll explore one of the most strategic and deliberate forms of manipulation: mirroring and mimicry. The manipulator doesn't just use words to control, they become a reflection of your deepest desires, fears, and dreams. Chapter 5. Mirroring and the illusion of connection. The greatest manipulators don't force their will upon you. They don't shout, they don't demand. Instead, they become you. Or at least, they become what you want to see in yourself. This technique is called mirroring, one of the most disarming, intimate, and invisible forms of manipulation in dark psychology. Mirroring works because of a basic human trait: we're drawn to ourselves. When we encounter someone who reflects our values, passions, and fears, we don't just feel understood, we feel bonded. It's why we say, "We just clicked," or "It's like they know me." In relationships, we crave connection, and nothing connects faster than a reflection of who we believe we are. A skilled manipulator uses this instinct against you. They study your speech patterns, your body language, your tone. They mirror your beliefs, your preferences, even your emotional rhythm. They become your emotional twin. But this is not connection, it's construction. Imagine meeting someone who shares your favorite music, your spiritual beliefs, your worldview. They finish your sentences. They laugh when you laugh. They seem to understand you on a level that others never have. It feels magical, fated, deep. But what you're seeing is not magic, it's mimicry. And behind the mimicry is motive. This technique is often used early in relationships, especially romantic or business ones. It builds rapid rapport and earns trust. You feel safe because you feel seen. But once your guard is down, the real game begins. The manipulator now has what they need: access to your vulnerabilities, your goals, your weaknesses. And they use this access to shape you, guide you, and subtly shift your choices. The power of mirroring lies in its subtlety. You never see the manipulator coming. You trust them. You let them in. You mistake reflection for authenticity. And when things go wrong, when the mask slips, you blame yourself. Maybe I misread them. Maybe I moved too fast. But the truth is, they designed the illusion. You were never seeing them. You were seeing a curated echo of yourself. Manipulators using mirroring don't always do it maliciously. Some do it instinctively, often those with high levels of narcissism or borderline traits. Others are deeply strategic: con artists, cult leaders, seducers. They know that by becoming your mirror, they bypass your skepticism. Your walls fall, not because they tore them down, but because you opened the gate. In psychological studies, mirroring has been shown to increase likability, trust, and even compliance. In experiments where waiters subtly mimicked a customer's order, repeating it back word for word, their tips significantly increased. In negotiations, mirroring body language often leads to faster deals. These effects are real, measurable, and powerful. But in dark psychology, mirroring is not about cooperation. It's about conquest. The manipulator gathers data while you feel connected. They store every emotional cue, every dream you've confessed. And when the time comes to manipulate you, to ask for something, to change your behavior, to break you. They already have the map of your soul. Recognizing mirroring is difficult, especially in the early stages, but there are signs. If someone seems too perfect, too in sync, if they agree with everything you say and validate every thought without friction, pause. Healthy relationships involve difference, conflict, disagreement. True connection doesn't feel like flattery. It feels like challenge, growth, and honesty. One of the most dangerous effects of mirroring is identity erosion. Over time, the victim may lose sight of where they end and the manipulator begins. They second-guess themselves. They adopt the manipulator's values. They become pliable, shaped by someone who once seemed like their soulmate. And when the manipulator withdraws, often suddenly, the victim is left hollow, confused, desperate to reclaim the connection that never truly existed. Mirroring can also be used in cult dynamics, where the leader mirrors the collective hopes and traumas of their followers. They reflect the group's fears back to them, offering themselves as the solution. In politics, this technique appears when a figure speaks your language, adopts your tone, your grievances, your anger, only to use that trust to steer you toward an agenda. To defend against mirroring, develop a strong sense of self, know your values, test new connections with time and tension. Watch how someone behaves when you disagree or say no. Do they adapt or do they vanish? Do they listen or do they mirror more intensely? Real connection requires time. Mirroring feeds on speed. Ask questions no mirror can reflect. Who are they when you stop talking? What do they believe when you're not guiding the conversation? What happens when you stop giving them clues? Mirroring is one of the most deceptive forms of manipulation because it doesn't feel dark, it feels divine. But the manipulator doesn't love you, they love your reflection. And when that reflection no longer serves them, they will discard it, and you along with it. In the next chapter, we'll explore how isolation becomes a tool in the manipulator's arsenal, because once they've mirrored you, once you've trusted them, the next step is simple. Remove your other mirrors. Chapter 6. Isolation and cutting off reality. Once trust has been cultivated through tactics like mirroring and love bombing, the manipulator prepares to isolate their target. This isn't done through brute force. It begins quietly, almost invisibly. A seed of doubt here, a whispered criticism there. Over time, the manipulator builds a psychological wall between the victim and everyone else. The goal is simple: control perception by limiting external input. Isolation is the crucible where manipulation grows into domination. At its core, isolation is about control of reality. We construct our worldview through reflection, interaction, and feedback from others. The more people we trust and communicate with, the more diverse our perspective becomes. But when a manipulator systematically removes these voices, one friend, one family member at a time, the victim's reality becomes smaller, more fragile, and increasingly centered around the manipulator. The process often begins with subtle remarks. Your friend doesn't really understand you. Your parents just want to control you. That coworker seems jealous of us. These suggestions appear concerned, protective even, but they plant doubt, and doubt corrodes connection. As the manipulator inserts themselves as the only safe or honest presence, they encourage the target to pull away from others. Phone calls become less frequent. Social gatherings feel uncomfortable. Messages go unanswered. And all the while, the manipulator is reinforcing the idea that they are the only person who truly gets it. This isolation is often emotional, before it becomes physical. The target might still see others, but no longer confides in them. Their emotional loyalty has shifted entirely to the manipulator. They've been convinced that no one else can be trusted. Isolation isn't always about cutting ties completely. It's about changing the meaning of those ties. Friends become threats. Family becomes suffocating. The manipulator positions themselves as a liberator, saving the victim from toxic influences. In reality, they're severing the ropes that anchor the victim to objective reality. In romantic manipulation, this can look like sudden relocations, pressuring the victim to move away from family or into financial dependency. In cults, it manifests through communal living, media restriction, or the labeling of outsiders as evil or unenlightened. In the workplace, it might come from a manager who undermines all other team members, fostering loyalty to themselves while spreading mistrust. Isolation deepens the dependency. The fewer people the target trusts, the more they rely on the manipulator for validation, advice, and emotional support. This dependency ensures that even when the manipulator becomes cruel, erratic, or controlling, the target feels they have nowhere else to go. The outside world now feels hostile, foreign, or dangerous. The psychology behind this is well documented. In experiments on social conformity, researchers found that people are highly influenced by perceived group consensus, even when the group is objectively wrong. Now imagine if the only group left is one person, the manipulator. There's no longer any external standard to compare against. The victim accepts the manipulator's version of events, even if it contradicts their memory or intuition. Over time, the victim's internal compass deteriorates. Their ability to make independent decisions wanes. Even minor choices, what to wear, how to speak, who to trust, are filtered through the manipulator's lens. This isn't just control over behavior, it's control over thought. What's terrifying about this form of isolation is that it often feels voluntary. The victim believes they are choosing to walk away from others. They may even defend the manipulator, fiercely, rejecting help from concerned friends. That's the power of emotional isolation. It doesn't feel like a prison, it feels like a sanctuary. Breaking free from isolation is difficult. It requires shattering the illusion that the manipulator is the only truth. This often comes through a moment of cognitive dissonance, a behavior or lie so undeniable that it ruptures the constructed reality. But even then, the road back is long. Rebuilding trust with others, re-establishing identity, unlearning dependence. 2. Guard against this manipulation tactic. Maintain multiple points of emotional contact in your life. Seek diverse perspectives. Pay attention when someone discourages your other relationships. Ask yourself, why would someone who loves me want me to be alone? Real connection empowers. It doesn't isolate. It welcomes the presence of others instead of resenting them. And above all, it never asks you to shrink your world just to fit inside someone else's. In the next chapter, we'll enter even darker territory, how fear and guilt are weaponized to cement control, and why these emotional levers are so effective in breaking even the strongest minds. Chapter 7. Guilt and fear as tools of submission. Guilt and fear. These two emotions sit at the foundation of human behavior. They are primal, deeply embedded in our psyche from childhood, and easily exploitable by those who understand their power. When wielded correctly, guilt and fear can bend the will, paralyze the mind, and reshape behavior without the victim ever realizing they've been manipulated. In the dark psychology playbook, they are not just tools, they are weapons. To understand how guilt is used as a tool of submission, we must first explore how it's formed. Guilt is born from empathy and morality. It arises when we believe we've done something wrong, violated an internal standard, hurt someone, or betrayed a value we hold dear. For manipulators, this is the perfect lever. By crafting situations in which the victim feels responsible for pain or failure, the manipulator secures obedience. And the cruel twist: it often doesn't matter if the guilt is rational. It only matters that it feels real. This technique is commonly seen in toxic relationships. The manipulator may say, "I'm only this upset because I care so much," or, "If you really loved me, you wouldn't act this way." These phrases distort boundaries and rewrite responsibility. Suddenly, the victim is apologizing for their own feelings. They begin walking on eggshells, regulating their behavior not to maintain harmony, but to avoid provoking guilt. Parents can use guilt as a control device too. After all I've done for you, this is how you treat me. Tears, the workplace it may sound like. I thought you were committed to this team. After someone declines an unethical request, guilt is powerful because it attacks the self-image. It makes the victim feel flawed, not just in action, but in essence. And guilt rarely travels alone. It is often coupled with fear, its darker sibling. Fear is even more primal. Rooted in survival, it bypasses logic and hijacks the nervous system. Manipulators use fear to create urgency, insecurity, and above all, compliance. But the fear they induce isn't always dramatic. It can be subtle. Fear of abandonment, fear of job loss, fear of social exclusion, fear of being misunderstood. Emotionally abusive relationships, fear may come in the form of threats, not always direct, but implied. The manipulator might say, "I don't know what I'd do without you," with a tone that suggests catastrophe, or they may withdraw affection, leaving silence that feels like a cliff edge. These tactics teach the victim to fear disconnection, punishment, or chaos. Fear also immobilizes. The victim begins to question their own thoughts, dreading the consequences of resistance. They comply, not because they agree, but because they fear the cost of disagreement. Their reality narrows. Every choice is filtered through the lens of fear. What will they do if I say this? What if I leave? What if I disappoint them again? When guilt and fear are combined, the result is devastating. The victim not only fears the manipulator's response, but also believes they deserve it. This dual pressure breaks down self-esteem, and once that's shattered, manipulation becomes effortless. In cults, these tactics are institutionalized. Members are told they're chosen, but only if they remain loyal. Doubt is punished, and guilt is used to keep members obedient. In abusive families, a child may grow up believing they are the problem, that their actions cause the parents' rage. In politics and media, fear is used to push narratives, while guilt convinces the audience they must act, or else. From a neurological perspective, these emotional responses engage the amygdala and limbic system, areas of the brain responsible for survival instincts. This bypasses rational thought. The manipulator doesn't need to persuade you logically. They just need to stimulate these systems consistently enough to rewire your default responses. What makes these tactics so insidious is how invisible they are. Guilt and fear don't always come with yelling or threats. Often, they're quiet, subtle, delivered with a sigh or a look or a "you've disappointed me." That's enough to trigger compliance in someone whose emotional boundaries have already been weakened. Defending against these weapons starts with awareness. Recognize when guilt is being used to control rather than connect. Ask yourself, am I being made to feel responsible for someone else's emotions or decisions? Does this fear serve me or them? Setting boundaries is critical. It's not your job to manage another's emotions, nor is it your duty to remain in a dynamic that thrives on fear. Real love, real friendship, real leadership. They empower you. They make space for disagreement. They support your growth. The manipulators of the world understand guilt and fear better than most therapists. But their knowledge is not wisdom, it is weaponry. You disarm them by knowing what they know and refusing to let it control you. In the next chapter, we'll explore how repetition, routine, and indoctrination slowly rewire the human mind, creating a prison so comfortable the victim doesn't want to leave. Chapter 8: Repetition, Indoctrination, and the Boiling Frog. In the world of manipulation, one of the most chillingly effective strategies is not overt control, but the slow, almost imperceptible shifting of perception over time. The metaphor often used to describe this process is that of the boiling frog. If you drop a frog into boiling water, it jumps out immediately. But if you place it in cool water and gradually raise the temperature, it doesn't notice the danger until it's too late. This is the very essence of psychological indoctrination through repetition. Repetition is the architect of belief. It rewires the brain by reinforcing neural pathways, making thoughts more accessible and automatic. The more we hear or experience something, the more familiar it becomes. And in psychology, familiarity is often confused with truth. This is called the illusory truth effect, the phenomenon where repeated statements are more likely to be perceived as true, regardless of their actual accuracy. Manipulators use this to devastating effect. In relationships, they might repeat certain phrases until the victim internalizes them. You're too sensitive. No one else would put up with you. I'm the only one who really understands you. These aren't just insults, they're mantras. And over time, they become part of the victim's internal dialogue. Indoctrination is a step beyond repetition. It involves reshaping not just what a person believes, but how they think. It attacks the framework of their cognition, removing critical thought and replacing it with dogma. Cult leaders use this by repeating ideological phrases, reinforcing loyalty, and slowly detaching members from outside influence. But indoctrination doesn't only happen in cults. It happens in abusive families, toxic workplaces, extremist political groups, and even marketing campaigns. The pattern is always the same. Repeat the message, reward compliance, punish dissent. Over time, the individual begins to accept the manipulator's worldview as their own. Routine plays a key role in this transformation. By embedding messages into daily life, manipulators normalize their influence. For example, an abuser may structure routines that limit the victim's independence, like controlling their schedule, finances, or even what they wear. Each repetition of control conditions the victim to expect, and eventually accept, less freedom. The boiling frog doesn't notice the water heating because each degree change is subtle. In the same way, the victim of psychological manipulation doesn't notice the erosion of their identity because each compromise, each concession, each small loss of agency feels like a rational trade-off in the moment. Only in hindsight does the full picture emerge, and by then, escape may feel impossible. From a neurological standpoint, repeated patterns engage the brain's plasticity. Neural pathways that are used frequently become stronger, more dominant. The brain begins to prefer them. This is why propaganda, for instance, is so effective over time. It simplifies the message, repeats it often, and makes alternatives seem confusing or dangerous. One of the most dangerous aspects of this manipulation method is that it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like routine, like comfort, like home. That's the true horror of it. Victims may even defend their abuser, not out of fear, but because they genuinely believe the narrative they've been fed. Breaking free from repetition and indoctrination requires a conscious interruption of the cycle. It starts with awareness, recognizing when your beliefs or routines have been installed by someone else. Then comes the painful process of deconstruction, questioning every thought that feels automatic, every truth you've accepted without scrutiny. Therapy, education, exposure to new ideas, all of these can help. But the first step is the hardest, realizing that you're in the pot, that the temperature has been rising, and that you have the power to leap out before it's too late. In the next chapter, we'll peel back another layer and examine the manipulator's masterstroke, learned helplessness. How they turn once powerful minds into passive participants, paralyzed by the belief that no matter what they do, nothing will change. Chapter 9. Learned helplessness and breaking the will. There is a psychological condition more paralyzing than fear, more binding than physical chains. It's called learned helplessness, a state where the mind is convinced that no matter what action is taken, the outcome will remain unchanged. This condition doesn't arise overnight. It's cultivated, molded through deliberate manipulation, and eventually solidifies into a prison without walls. It's one of the most insidious tools in the manipulator's arsenal. The concept of learned helplessness originates from experiments conducted by psychologists Martin Seligman and Stephen Meyer in the 1960s. They exposed dogs to unavoidable electric shocks. Later, when those dogs were placed in a situation where they could easily escape the shocks, many didn't even try. They had learned, through repeated trauma, that their actions had no effect on their environment. They gave up. They surrendered their agency. This phenomenon, though horrifying in the lab, occurs every day in human relationships and social structures. Abusive partners create environments where their victims believe that nothing they do can stop the emotional, verbal, or physical torment. Parents instill this belief in children through endless criticism and punishment. Employers foster it through micromanagement and toxic hierarchies. Over time, the person internalizes a brutal lie. There's no point in trying. The transition from hope to helplessness is often subtle. At first, the victim resists. They fight back. They try to reason. But manipulators are patient. They wear down resistance slowly, punishing effort, ignoring boundaries, rewarding submission. It becomes a psychological war of attrition. The victim eventually stops complaining, stops planning, stops imagining a way out. And when the mind stops imagining escape, it becomes its own warden. In this state, the manipulator no longer needs to exert overt control. The victim polices themselves. They don't need to be locked in a room. They stop walking toward the door. It's psychological captivity, disguised as apathy. This is why learned helplessness is so devastating. It infects not just behavior, but identity. Victims begin to describe themselves as weak, broken, incapable. I can't do this. I'm not smart enough. I don't deserve better. These aren't just thoughts. They're internalized beliefs, repeated until they calcify into truth. The manipulation deepens when these individuals begin blaming themselves. The abuser no longer needs to justify their actions. The victim does it for them. I pushed them too far. I overreacted. Maybe I am too emotional. The locus of control has shifted entirely from external to internal, and the manipulator's job is complete. This state of helplessness can extend beyond personal relationships. Entire communities, even societies, can be conditioned into compliance through systemic oppression and repeated trauma. If every protest is met with violence, if every voice is silenced, people stop believing in the power of change. The manipulation becomes generational. But the story doesn't have to end here. Breaking free from learned helplessness is possible, but it requires both internal and external shifts. Internally, the victim must begin to challenge their narrative. They must rediscover the tiniest sparks of agency, the ability to say no, to ask questions, to want something different. These may seem like small acts, but psychologically, they are revolutionary. Externally, change often requires intervention. Friends, therapists, support groups, outside voices that challenge the manipulator's conditioning and offer an alternative story. The road is long and often painful, but every step toward reclaiming control is a step toward freedom. Rebuilding after learned helplessness isn't just about removing the manipulator. It's about reprogramming the mind to believe in its own power again. It's about saying, I can, even when every fiber of your past says, you can't. In the next chapter, we'll explore how manipulators strategically use authority, uniforms, and status symbols to bypass critical thinking, leveraging our psychological wiring to gain obedience without question. Chapter 10. Authority, Obedience, and the Illusion of Legitimacy. Authority. It's one of the most ancient forms of psychological leverage. From the earliest tribal structures to the most advanced corporate and governmental hierarchies today, humans have been conditioned to obey those in positions of perceived power. But what if authority is nothing more than a well-dressed illusion, one that masks manipulation behind the veil of legitimacy? To understand how manipulators use authority, we first need to understand the psychological wiring behind obedience. In the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted one of the most famous and disturbing experiments in behavioral science. Participants were instructed to deliver increasingly painful electric shocks to a person in another room whenever they answered a question incorrectly. As the shocks increased in intensity, the victim screamed in agony. Yet, under the pressure of an authoritative experimenter in a lab coat, most participants continued delivering shocks, even when they believed they were causing real harm. The experiment revealed something chilling. People are more likely to commit harmful acts if an authority figure tells them to. The mere appearance of legitimacy, white coat, title, controlled environment, was enough to override moral instincts. That same psychological reflex can be weaponized by manipulators. Abusers and manipulators know this well. They adopt titles, uniforms, and roles that create an aura of control. A boss with a title becomes untouchable. A religious leader becomes unquestionable. A parent becomes infallible. When authority is established, obedience follows, and often so does silence. But the power of authority doesn't just lie in titles, it lies in presentation. Consider how tone, posture, eye contact, and language all reinforce perceived dominance. A manipulator might not have official power, but they speak like someone who does. They interrupt, they command, they correct. Slowly, others begin to defer to them, often without realizing why. Social dynamics shift. They become the unspoken leader. This is why manipulators often seek environments where hierarchy is enforced and questioning is discouraged. Authoritarian systems, whether political, religious, or familial, become fertile ground for unchecked control. In these settings, to disobey is to invite punishment. And so, many comply not out of belief, but out of fear. The illusion of legitimacy also extends to symbols, badges, certificates, credentials. A manipulator may exaggerate their expertise or fabricate authority to build credibility. Once others believe in their knowledge or superiority, they stop challenging them. Critical thinking is suspended, replaced by submission. Even language becomes a tool. Manipulators will use technical jargon or complex vocabulary to assert dominance. They speak in absolutes. They dismiss opposing views as naive or uninformed. The goal is to create a dynamic where disagreement feels foolish, even dangerous. The danger here is subtle but profound. When authority is blind, obedience becomes dangerous. Manipulators exploit this vulnerability by creating echo chambers, spaces where their authority goes unchallenged, where followers repeat their words, and where dissent is either mocked or punished. This is not leadership. This is control, escaping. The illusion of legitimacy requires us to question not just the manipulator, but our own programming. Why do we trust certain voices more than others? Why do we obey orders that go against our conscience? Why does appearance sometimes matter more than substance? Awareness is the antidote. Authority must be earned, not assumed. Legitimacy must be questioned, not blindly accepted. True power comes from wisdom and integrity, not a title, not a suit, not a microphone. In the next chapter, we'll explore how manipulators cultivate cult-like followings, turning everyday people into loyal devotees, often without them ever realizing they've been converted. Chapter 11. Cult Mentality and Group Manipulation. The terrifying thing about cults is how ordinary they often appear at first. From the outside, they may look like tight-knit communities, spiritual retreats, or movements offering meaning and connection. But beneath their inviting surface lies a powerful psychological machinery designed to strip individuality, erode free will, and create unwavering loyalty to a singular leader or ideology. Cults are not just religious, they are psychological ecosystems where manipulation thrives. What makes cults so effective is their ability to prey on universal human needs: belonging, purpose, identity. At vulnerable moments, after trauma, during transition or an existential crisis, people crave stability and meaning. Cults offer that. They become a surrogate family. They promise truth, salvation, empowerment. But the price of admission? Your autonomy. Manipulators who run cults understand one central principle: isolate the mind, then reprogram it. This begins with love bombing, the overwhelming affection and attention that makes the new recruit feel uniquely seen and valued. You're told you're special, chosen, finally understood. This emotional high is disarming. It builds trust fast, making it easy to overlook red flags. Once the emotional bond is formed, the group begins to control your reality. Information is carefully filtered. Outside influences are framed as evil or dangerous. You're told your old life was a lie. Your friends, your family, your past, all tools of corruption. The cult becomes the sole source of truth. This is when indoctrination begins. Indoctrination doesn't always look like brainwashing. It's often subtle: daily rituals, repeated mantras, coded language. These techniques rewire your cognitive patterns. Critical thinking is replaced by groupthink. You begin to speak their language, adopt their mannerisms, repeat their beliefs. The line between self and system dissolves. The leader of the cult, often charismatic, enigmatic, and authoritarian, becomes the epicenter of this mental universe. Their word becomes law. They are exalted, even when abusive. Their flaws are reframed as tests. Their demands, no matter how bizarre or degrading, are rationalized by the group. This is the terrifying power of group manipulation. It makes the irrational feel righteous. Punishment is just as important as reward. Dissent is not tolerated. Questioning is framed as betrayal. Members who express doubt are shamed, isolated, or subjected to emotional attacks. Over time, fear replaces reason. You conform not because you believe, but because you fear being cast out. And then there's the illusion of choice. Many cults claim to empower members, to help them awaken their true selves, but this awakening is carefully scripted. You are allowed to make choices, but only the ones that align with the cult's doctrine. You feel free, but you're trapped in a cage made of beliefs. The scariest part? Cult-like manipulation doesn't only exist in hidden compounds or fringe, spiritual groups. It happens in high-control religions, extremist political factions, MLM companies, self-help empires, and even online communities. Wherever there's a charismatic figure, an echo chamber, and a code of unquestionable beliefs, you have the makings of a modern cult. Escaping cult mentality requires immense courage. It means dismantling an identity built on false promises. It means questioning beliefs you once clung to for survival. But once the illusion breaks, clarity returns. You remember how to think for yourself. In the next chapter, we'll move deeper into the psychological arsenal manipulators use to reshape your emotions, turning guilt and empathy into weapons against you. Chapter 12: Emotional Hijacking and Weaponizing Empathy. There's a reason why manipulators rarely scream or strike in plain sight. It's because the most dangerous forms of control are emotional, not physical. Emotional hijacking is the art of steering another person's inner world with such precision that they don't realize they're being guided until it's too late. In this chapter, we'll explore how emotions, particularly empathy, guilt, shame, and fear, are co-opted and turned against us. At the heart of emotional manipulation is the exploitation of empathy. Empathy is one of humanity's most powerful connectors. It allows us to feel with others, to share in their pain and joy. But to a manipulator, empathy is not a bond. It's a tool, a lever, a weapon. They learn to simulate vulnerability, to project distress, to act hurt or helpless, not because they feel it, but because they know you will. This creates what psychologists call a compassion trap. You begin to prioritize the manipulator's emotions over your own needs. You apologize for things you didn't do. You accept blame to restore harmony. You suppress your truth to avoid hurting them, even when they're the ones doing the damage. The deeper your empathy, the easier you are to control. Emotional hijacking often begins subtly. A sigh, a tear, a distant gaze. It invites inquiry. What's wrong? You ask. And from there, the manipulator weaves a story designed not to heal, but to hook. Their pain becomes your responsibility. Their suffering becomes your guilt. You feel compelled to fix what you didn't break. Over time, this dynamic breeds emotional servitude. You live in constant hyper-awareness of their moods. You anticipate their reactions, adjust your behavior to prevent their emotional collapse. Your own needs vanish in the shadow of their dramatized despair. This is not love, it's programming. Another tool in the manipulator's arsenal is selective vulnerability. This isn't real openness, it's a calculated performance. They share a tragic story, a past trauma, a wound that tugs at your heart. But instead of fostering mutual trust, they use that vulnerability to justify bad behavior. I lash out because I've been hurt. I lie because I was betrayed. You begin to excuse the inexcusable. Empathy has turned to enslavement. Guilt is perhaps the most corrosive emotion manipulators exploit. Through guilt tripping, they imply that you're selfish, ungrateful, or cold if you don't meet their endless emotional demands. They twist your kindness into obligation. After all I've done for you, you used to care. I guess I'm just a burden. These are not cries for connection. They're psychological shackles. One of the most destructive outcomes of emotional hijacking is identity erosion. You lose your sense of self. Your decisions become theirs. Your emotional thermostat is set to their weather. You doubt your instincts, your worth, your voice. The manipulator has effectively taken residence inside your psyche. The final layer is the emotional reset. Manipulators often cycle between cruelty and kindness to keep you destabilized. After a storm of accusations or guilt, they may suddenly turn loving again, offering affection, gifts, or apologies. This creates a trauma bond. Your nervous system gets addicted to the high-low pattern, mistaking volatility for passion, chaos for connection, and the cycle repeats. To break free from emotional hijacking, you must reclaim your emotional autonomy. This means learning to set boundaries, even when it feels cruel. It means resisting the urge to fix others' feelings at the cost of your own. It means recognizing that your empathy should not be a leash around your neck. Ask yourself, are your emotions your own, or are they being edited, shaped, and dictated by someone else? If the answer frightens you, that's not weakness, that's awareness. And awareness is the first step toward freedom. In the next chapter, we'll go even deeper into the world of language, because words, when used strategically, can be more dangerous than any weapon. Chapter 13. Neurolinguistic Programming and Conversational Control. Language can liberate, but it can also entrap. In the hands of a skilled manipulator, words become surgical instruments that cut through logic, implant suggestions, and rewrite memories. In this chapter, we descend into the eerie precision of neurolinguistic programming, or NLP, a psychological framework originally developed for therapy, now weaponized by those who seek to dominate the minds of others. NLP begins with one simple premise. The human brain can be programmed like a computer through patterns of language, tone, and gesture. It posits that our perceptions, beliefs, and behaviors are shaped not just by what is said, but how it's said, and more importantly, how it's framed in our internal mental models. Manipulators using NLP techniques are like hypnotists who never snap their fingers. Instead, they embed commands inside conversations, tell stories that bypass conscious defenses, and use your own responses to guide you deeper into their influence. It's conversational control disguised as dialogue. 1 of the foundational techniques in NLP is called pacing and leading. It starts with the manipulator establishing rapport by mirroring your speech patterns, breathing rate, or even posture. This creates a sense of unconscious alignment. You feel understood, connected, safe. Once that trust is established, the Manipulator begins to lead the conversation subtly toward their desired outcome. They may say things like, "You're the kind of person who wants clarity, right?" Or, "Imagine how good you'll feel once this is over." These aren't innocent suggestions. They are directives, framed within your emotional landscape. The manipulator creates a vision of the future that you are subtly nudged to accept. Another method is anchoring. This involves associating a specific word, gesture, or tone with an emotional response. For example, a manipulator might always touch your shoulder when delivering praise. Over time, the touch alone can trigger a feeling of safety or approval, even if no words are spoken. Anchors bypass logic and operate in the body's emotional memory. The real danger lies in embedded commands, phrases that contain imperatives hidden within larger, seemingly innocuous sentences. "I don't know if you're ready to trust me," yet may sound uncertain, but it contains the embedded directive. Trust me. These commands slide past the conscious mind and settle deep into the subconscious, where they quietly influence behavior. Manipulators also use temporal language to shift your perception of time and responsibility. Instead of saying, "You made a mistake," they'll say, "Back then, when that version of you made that choice." This subtly separates you from the error, making you more pliable. Or they might say, "Soon you'll realize what I meant," planting a future conclusion in your mind before you've had a chance to reflect. Storytelling is another powerful weapon. A manipulator might tell a story about a friend, a client, or even a made-up person whose experience mirrors yours. But embedded in that tale is a moral, a direction, a suggestion. You relate, you empathize, you internalize. And all the while, you're being gently steered. Even silence can be used strategically. After delivering a loaded phrase, the manipulator may pause. The discomfort of the silence compels you to fill it, often by agreeing, apologizing, or confessing. It's pressure without force, manipulation without contact. The brilliance of NLP is that its effects feel organic. Victims often believe they've reached conclusions on their own. They don't feel coerced, they feel enlightened. That's what makes it so dangerous. To defend against NLP-based manipulation, you must become hyper-aware of language patterns, especially those that feel too smooth, too agreeable. Pay attention to your emotional responses. Are you feeling suddenly open, guilty, excited, or confused? These shifts might not be accidents. Remember, not every persuasive speaker is a predator, but those who use words to control instead of connect often follow patterns. Spotting those patterns is your first line of defense. In the next chapter, we'll explore manipulation in relationships, how intimacy can be used as a leash and love turned into a labyrinth. Chapter 14: The Manipulative Dynamics of Romantic Relationships. Romantic relationships are often viewed as sacred spaces, safe harbors from the chaos of the outside world. But what happens when the very person you love turns that intimacy into a weapon? In this chapter, we uncover how manipulation infects relationships from within, cloaked in the language of affection, vulnerability, and trust. Manipulation in romantic relationships rarely begins with overt control. It often starts with intense attention, what some call love bombing. A flood of compliments, gifts, constant contact. The manipulator creates a whirlwind of affection that feels like a fairy tale. You're told you're special, that fate brought you together. And in the glow of that emotional intoxication, your defenses melt. But this intensity isn't love, it's strategy. Once the emotional hook is set, the shift begins. Subtle criticisms are introduced under the guise of concern. "You'd look better if you lost a little weight. I just worry that your friends don't have your best interests." These comments don't feel abusive, they feel protective, even caring. But they serve a darker purpose, to chip away at your self-esteem and isolate you from outside influences. The manipulator wants to be your entire world, so they begin to sever your connections. You might start cancelling plans with friends. You stop talking to family as often. You think it's your choice, but it's been carefully orchestrated. Gaslighting is often layered into this dynamic. When you raise concerns or point out inconsistencies, you're met with denial, deflection, or blame. That never happened. You're just overthinking again. You always ruin things with your paranoia. Over time, your sense of reality bends to fit their narrative. Emotional highs and lows become a cycle. You're punished with silence, withdrawn affection, or emotional outbursts when you displease them. Then, once you've been sufficiently broken down, you're rewarded again, with tenderness, apologies, and promises to change. This cycle of abuse is the very engine of trauma bonding. You begin to confuse anxiety with love, pain with passion. Manipulators in romantic relationships often project their behavior onto their partner. If they're cheating, they accuse you of being unfaithful. If they're lying, they question your honesty. This deflection is meant to keep you constantly on the defensive, scrambling to prove your loyalty while their actions go unchecked. Another key tactic is future faking, painting an idealized vision of the life you'll build together, a future that's always just out of reach. It's designed to keep you invested, always working harder, always holding on, even when the present is filled with emotional chaos. Financial control is another form of manipulation. The manipulator may slowly erode your financial independence, urging you to quit your job or share your passwords for transparency. They may monitor your spending, withhold money, or use finances to guilt you. Eventually, you become dependent, not just emotionally, but economically. Sexual manipulation can also play a role. Affection is given or withheld based on obedience. Boundaries are pushed gradually, under the illusion of intimacy or playfulness. Over time, the partner feels obligated rather than desired, as consent becomes entangled with fear of rejection or punishment. In many cases, the manipulated partner starts to question their own worth. They blame themselves for the deterioration of the relationship. They internalize the abuser's criticism. Their identity becomes a reflection of the manipulator's approval or disapproval. What makes romantic manipulation so devastating is that it targets the very parts of us that crave connection, belonging, and unconditional love. It's not just about control. It's about erasing the self. Breaking free from this kind of relationship is difficult, not just because of fear, but because the victim often still loves the person harming them. They remember the good moments, the apologies, the promises, and they hope, desperately, that love can fix what love has broken. But awareness is the first step toward liberation. Understanding these dynamics strips away the illusion. When you see manipulation for what it is, the power it holds begins to fade. In the next chapter, we'll look beyond individual relationships and examine how manipulators use charm, status, and storytelling to influence entire social groups. Chapter 15. Social Engineering and Charismatic Manipulators. Charisma. It's a word we associate with charm, magnetism, that electric presence some people seem to carry effortlessly. We are drawn to charismatic people. They hold our gaze, command our attention, and often they lead. But behind the glossy surface of charisma, there can be something much more sinister. An invisible hand that shapes thoughts, bends reality, and silently engineers obedience. This chapter peels back the mask of charm to reveal one of the most potent forms of psychological manipulation: social engineering. Social engineering isn't just a term used in cybersecurity or espionage. It's a broad set of psychological techniques that manipulate people into revealing information, offering access, or behaving in ways they never intended, all through deception and persuasion. And when practiced by a charismatic manipulator, it becomes something almost supernatural in its effectiveness. Imagine a person who walks into a room and instantly shifts the energy. People lean in, they laugh more, they agree more easily, not because of what's being said, but because of how it's said. This person knows how to read a crowd, how to mirror body language, how to plant ideas so subtly they feel like your own. This is not coincidence. This is design. Charismatic manipulators exploit a phenomenon known as the halo effect, a cognitive bias in which our overall impression of a person influences how we feel about their character. If someone is attractive, confident, and articulate, we tend to assume they're trustworthy, competent, even morally good. But that assumption is a smokescreen. Charisma doesn't equal integrity. It only creates the illusion of it. At the core of social engineering is the understanding that human beings are not as rational as we think. We are emotional creatures first, logical thinkers second. And if you can tug the right emotional strings, fear, admiration, guilt, urgency, you can bypass logic entirely. You can convince someone to open a door, share a password, hand over money, or follow a belief system that makes no rational sense, all without them realizing they've been manipulated. Let's talk about framing, a key element in this process. Charismatic manipulators are masters of framing conversations in ways that benefit them. They don't argue directly. Instead, they shape the context. They don't ask, "Do you want to help me?" They say, "People like us stick together, right?" Framing sets the boundaries of the discussion and forces others to make decisions within a psychological trap. You think you're choosing freely, but your range of options was designed by someone else. They also use social proof, another powerful psychological lever. When we see others agreeing with someone, following someone, praising someone, we're more likely to do the same. Charismatic manipulators carefully curate their image. They surround themselves with fans, enablers, or even actors in the early stages of a con. Their social media may be filled with testimonials, pictures with celebrities, flashy lifestyles, all to signal one thing: everyone else believes in me. Why don't you? But social engineering doesn't just happen in one-on-one interactions. It thrives in group dynamics. These manipulators know how to become the center of gravity in a room. They do it by controlling narratives. They don't present facts. They tell stories, emotional, vivid, compelling stories. They appeal to identity, to aspiration, to fear of missing out. They don't say, "Buy this product." They say, "People who use this product are leaders, not followers." And suddenly, buying becomes a statement of self-worth. One of the most dangerous aspects of charismatic manipulation is how it targets insecurity. The manipulator will subtly identify your weaknesses, your need for approval, your hunger for purpose, your fear of rejection. Then they present themselves as the solution to your problem. They position themselves as a mentor, a savior, a lover, a gatekeeper to something better. And once you believe they hold the key to what you lack, they hold power over you. This is especially effective in high-pressure environments. Think multi-level marketing seminars, cult gatherings, high-ticket coaching programs. These environments are engineered to exhaust your critical thinking. Loud music, flashing lights, relentless positivity, audience participation, all of it is psychological warfare. And at the center stands the charismatic manipulator, arms wide, smile shining, telling you that you're special if you just follow their lead. Social engineers often use reciprocity against us. If they give you something, a compliment, a favor, even just their time, you feel compelled to give something in return. It's a deeply ingrained social rule. And once you've given something, your time, your loyalty, your money, you're more likely to keep giving. That's called commitment consistency. We justify our past actions by aligning future ones with them, even if we're being used. What's worse is that charismatic manipulators rarely look like villains. They often believe their own lies. They think they're helping, that they deserve loyalty, that if people get hurt, it's just collateral damage. This self-delusion makes them even more dangerous because they don't show the usual signs of deception. They believe in their performance. Let's not forget the manipulator's ability to use silence and mystery as tools. Not every manipulator is loud. Some are enigmatic, reserved, almost spiritual. They speak less, but when they do, it feels profound. They create the illusion that they know something you don't, that they have access to knowledge, success, or enlightenment. And in chasing that mystery, you surrender more than you realize. In modern times, social engineering has moved online. Influencers, fake gurus, crypto scams, dating apps. Charismatic manipulation has gone digital. A carefully curated online persona can simulate intimacy, authenticity, even vulnerability. But it's all performance. And the target, your trust, your time, your resources. The scariest part? You don't know it's happening until it's over. You look back and realize your choices weren't your own. Your actions were nudged. Your thoughts were guided. Your fears were exploited. And the person you thought was your friend, your leader, your mentor, was just a master manipulator playing chess with your mind. To defend against this, awareness is your armor. Study the techniques, know the red flags. Ask yourself, am I being led, or am I choosing to follow? Don't be afraid to slow down decisions. Real power doesn't pressure. Real truth doesn't need to sell itself, and real connection doesn't require performance. In the next chapter, we'll dive even deeper into how manipulators exploit identity, ideology, and belonging to recruit followers and create movements, where the line between belief and brainwashing begins to blur. Chapter 16. Ideological manipulation and brainwashing techniques. Ideologies are the operating systems of the human mind. They tell us who we are, what's right, what's wrong, who to trust, and who to fear. At their best, ideologies unite people under a shared sense of purpose. At their worst, they become cages, structures so convincing, so absolute, that anyone who questions them is seen not as curious, but as dangerous. This chapter explores one of the most terrifying forms of manipulation, the hijacking of belief. This isn't just persuasion, it's brainwashing. And the scariest part? The victims don't even know it's happening. Ideological manipulation is the process of reshaping someone's identity by aligning them to a belief system so completely that their thoughts, emotions, and even their moral compass become owned by the ideology. The manipulator doesn't just want obedience, they want devotion. Not just your actions, they want your mind. It often begins with emotional vulnerability. People don't join extreme ideologies because they're weak or ignorant. They do it because they're human, hurt, searching, lonely, or afraid. And the manipulator, be it a cult leader, political extremist, religious radical, or corporate visionary, offers them something powerful, a story, a reason, a purpose. That story usually has 3 parts: a broken world, a hidden truth, and a promised future. The world is in chaos, they say, but we know the truth. And if you join us, you'll be part of something greater. It's intoxicating. Belonging is one of the most primal human needs. And when someone offers you identity, community, and salvation all at once, you follow. The next step is information control. Manipulators isolate their followers from outside opinions, not always physically, but mentally. They use slogans, repeated catchphrases, and simplified black and white thinking. You're either with us or against us. Everyone else is blind. The media lies. Only we tell the truth. Slowly, the manipulated stop asking questions. They stop thinking critically. Dissent is framed as betrayal. Language is weaponized. Loaded terms are introduced. Outsiders become sheep, infidels, traitors. The in-group becomes awakened, chosen, the righteous. This isn't just semantics, it's psychological warfare. Words shape perception. And when you control the vocabulary, you control the thoughts. Rituals and repetition reinforce the ideology. Daily affirmations, group chants, curated media, symbolic gestures. The ideology isn't just something you believe, it becomes something you perform. And the more you perform it, the deeper it takes root. At the heart of brainwashing is dissonance and dependency. The manipulator breaks you down emotionally through guilt, confusion, or fear, and then rebuilds you through ideology. You were lost before you found us. Your past was a lie, but this is the truth. When your former identity is dismantled and your sense of self is rebuilt within the ideology, resistance becomes nearly impossible. Why? Because now, to question the belief is to question yourself. One of the most horrifying techniques is thought stopping. Followers are trained to shut down uncomfortable ideas the moment they arise. If they feel doubt, they're told to pray harder, repeat a phrase, meditate on the leader's words. Critical thinking becomes a sin. Independent thought is replaced with ideological reflex. Manipulators also rely on enemy construction. Every ideology needs a villain, a common enemy to unify against. Whether it's a race, a nation, a class, a religion, or a political party, scapegoating strengthens the bond within. Hatred becomes a glue. It distracts from the manipulator's flaws and keeps followers in a constant state of emotional arousal. Fear, after all, is a powerful motivator. Over time, the ideology becomes more than a belief. It becomes a filter through which the entire world is viewed. Any evidence that contradicts it is dismissed as lies. Any suffering endured is reframed as sacrifice, and any doubts are labeled as weakness, spiritual failure, or infiltration by the enemy. The final goal is total identification. The follower no longer says, "I believe in this ideology." They say, "I am this ideology." The line between self and system vanishes. Now they don't just follow orders, they defend them. They don't just submit to the leader, they worship them. And when someone reaches this stage, they'll do anything. History is soaked in the blood of ideologies gone mad. Wars, genocides, cult suicides, terrorist attacks, all carried out, not by monsters, but by manipulated minds convinced they were doing good. This is why ideological manipulation is so dangerous. It doesn't work through force. It works through meaning. It taps into our deepest needs for purpose, identity, and belonging, and weaponizes them. To protect yourself, you must become uncomfortable with certainty. Real truth invites questions. Real leaders encourage dissent. Real beliefs can survive scrutiny. If an ideology demands absolute loyalty, punishes doubt, and isolates you from opposing views, it's not a belief, it's a cage. In the next chapter, we'll move from the macro to the micro. We'll explore how manipulators use body, language, micro-expressions, and even eye contact to dominate in face-to-face interactions without saying a word. Chapter 17. The Silent Language of Control, Nonverbal Manipulation. Words can lie, but the body almost never does. Manipulators know this, and that's why some of the most powerful control techniques don't come in the form of speeches or arguments, but in a glance, a pause, a gesture. In this chapter, we journey into the silent dimension of manipulation, the space between words, the subtle, unconscious battlefield where dominance is won without uttering a single sentence. Imagine walking into a room and instantly feeling tension or submission before anyone speaks. That's not intuition. That's your brain processing thousands of nonverbal cues. Manipulators, especially those who operate in the shadows of social interactions, are masters of this silent language. They don't just study body language, they exploit it. Let's start with eye contact, the most primal form of connection. In normal conversation, eye contact shows confidence, attentiveness, and sincerity. But a manipulator uses it like a weapon. Too much eye contact can feel invasive, even hypnotic. They'll lock eyes with you, not to connect, but to disarm, to dominate. Prolonged, unblinking stares create pressure. They override your sense of space. It's a subtle message. I'm in control. I see you. I own this moment. On the other hand, breaking eye contact at specific moments, like right after telling a lie, can confuse your instincts. You begin to question your own perception. Did they look guilty or just distracted? This micro-misdirection erodes your ability to trust your gut. Facial expressions, too, become tools. A faint smirk while delivering bad news. A fake smile just a beat too late. Raised eyebrows to mock rather than surprise. A true manipulator's face becomes a mask that reflects what you want to see, while hiding what they really intend. Micro-expressions, those involuntary twitches and flashes of real emotion, reveal the truth for only milliseconds, but manipulators train themselves to suppress them or turn them into confusion tactics. Then there's physical positioning. Proximity signals power. A manipulator might stand too close, just enough to make you uncomfortable, but not enough to let you call it out. This subtle invasion of personal space triggers discomfort. It makes your brain vulnerable. Why? Because when your physical boundaries are breached, your mental boundaries tend to follow. They'll also use height and angles, leaning over you while sitting, placing themselves at the head of the table, positioning their chair slightly higher. Every inch matters. Every physical cue whispers, "I'm above you." Touch, too, plays a role. A light hand on the shoulder, a pat on the back. In isolation, these gestures seem friendly, but repeated, timed touches can create psychological bonds, lower your defenses, and subtly enforce dominance. If they touch you when you speak, it trains your brain to associate that contact with approval. And if they suddenly withdraw that touch, your mind chases it, like a dog chasing praise. Manipulators also master mirroring, but not to connect, rather to control. They mimic your posture, your tone, your rhythm. You feel understood, seen, even safe. But this illusion of similarity builds trust not to form a bond, but to slip under your radar. Once you feel connected, they can lead the dance. Even silence is part of their arsenal. Strategic pauses create tension. Long silences after you speak make you question yourself. You rush to fill the quiet, revealing more than you intended. Manipulators use silence like a scalpel. It's not absence, it's pressure. Gestures become cues, finger-steepling signals superiority. Slow, deliberate movements suggest patience and control. Quick, sharp hand motions can interrupt your thought flow, derail your arguments. They choreograph their gestures like a performance, each one calibrated for psychological effect. And let's not forget posture. An open, relaxed posture in the face of your anxiety can trigger self-doubt. It sends the message, "Look how calm I am. Why are you so nervous?" Shrugged shoulders, crossed arms, leaning back. They're all scripts in the manipulator's silent playbook. In group settings, these tactics amplify. The manipulator may scan the room slowly before speaking, establishing dominance without words. They may position themselves between allies and targets, breaking eye lines, controlling group dynamics with nothing more than motion. They may lean into one person while ignoring another, creating psychological imbalance. These are power plays, executed through spatial control. Even their pace becomes manipulative, walking slowly into a meeting when everyone else is seated, speaking with deliberate pauses while others rush. It tells you, "I'm not bound by your urgency. I set the rhythm here." Nonverbal manipulation works because it's invisible. You don't realize you're reacting. You just feel off balance, uncertain, exposed. And that's the trap. Once your body reacts emotionally, your brain follows. And by the time you notice something is wrong, you've already surrendered the frame. So how do you defend yourself? Awareness, presence, the willingness to name the discomfort out loud. If someone's eye contact feels invasive, break it intentionally. If they crowd your space, move back and reclaim it. If their tone seems too smooth, too rehearsed, question it. And most importantly, trust your body. Long before your conscious mind catches the manipulation, your nervous system feels it. Don't ignore those goosebumps, that stomach twist, that sudden tightness in your throat. They're warning signs, your first and best defense. In a world where words are cheap and smiles are rehearsed, sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who doesn't say much, but makes you feel everything. In our next chapter, we'll move from silent influence to digital domination. Get ready to see how manipulation thrives in the age of algorithms, notifications, and curated feeds, as we explore how dark psychology has infiltrated the online world. Chapter 18. Digital Puppeteers. Manipulation in the age of social media. Imagine this. You wake up, reach for your phone, and within seconds, you're scrolling. A friend's vacation photo, a sponsored ad for shoes you thought about yesterday, a reel that hooks you instantly, a stranger's opinion that somehow ruins your mood. 10 minutes in, and you haven't even brushed your teeth, but your mind has already been touched, twisted, manipulated. Welcome to the modern battlefield, a place where manipulation doesn't wear a mask or whisper behind closed doors. It stares you in the face from a glowing screen. This is no longer the realm of individual manipulators. Here, the puppet strings are held by algorithms. The platforms we trust for entertainment, information, and connection have learned how to shape behavior, beliefs, and identity, all without us noticing. And the manipulators, they're digital puppeteers, tech companies, advertisers, influencers, and sometimes even ourselves. Social media manipulation works on a foundational truth. The mind craves attention and validation. And platforms like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook are designed to give just enough to keep you chasing more. Every like, share, and comment activates the dopamine system, the same brain mechanism triggered by gambling, drugs, and sex. It's a reward loop, and it's engineered to be addictive. But here's the catch. You're not the customer. You're the product. Everything you do online, every pause, every click, every angry comment, is harvested, analyzed, and fed back into the machine. It learns your fears, your insecurities, your political leanings, your desires. It doesn't just watch you, it studies you. And once it knows you well enough, it begins to shape what you see, and more dangerously, what you believe. This is called algorithmic reinforcement. Let's say you start watching videos about fitness. Soon, you're shown diet plans, workout hacks, transformation stories. But then come the fat-shaming reels, the extreme routines, the supplement ads. Before long, you're no longer exploring health. You're spiraling into obsession, comparison, and body dysmorphia, all because an algorithm thinks that's what will keep you engaged. And it's not just personal. Entire societies are being manipulated through echo chambers and digital tribalism. Social media isolates users into content bubbles, reinforcing their existing beliefs while silencing opposing views. This isn't accidental, it's design. Controversy drives engagement. Rage spreads faster than reason. Lies get more clicks than truth. So platforms give you exactly what keeps you scrolling, even if it tears the world apart. Ever wonder why you're shown certain ads right after a conversation? Why some influencers feel so real and authentic? It's like they know you. That's not intuition. That's data-driven psychology at play. Behavioral scientists and marketers collaborate to craft emotional hooks, visual stimuli, and messaging that bypass logic and speak directly to your subconscious fears. But the darkest layer of all, we become self-manipulators. We edit our lives to fit a narrative. We post for validation. We compare our worst moments to someone else's highlight reel. Over time, our sense of self becomes tangled with digital approval. We begin to perform rather than live, and in doing so, we manipulate others without even realizing it, projecting illusions, hiding pain, perpetuating cycles of insecurity. Digital manipulation isn't just about deception, it's about control through invisibility. You don't see the strings, you don't notice the nudges, and that's what makes it so powerful. Now think about how this plays out with influencers and creators. Many portray themselves as relatable, vulnerable, trustworthy, but their content is often carefully curated. Their vulnerability is calculated. Every frame, every caption, Every collaboration is part of a strategy. They make you feel seen, but, in reality, they're steering your emotions toward clicks, loyalty, or sales. Manipulation thrives in three main digital strategies. Emotional hijacking. Content that triggers fear, anger, or nostalgia to bypass your critical thinking. Artificial intimacy. The illusion of closeness created by oversharing and consistent interaction, making you trust someone who doesn't know you exist. FOMO. Fear of missing out. Limited time offers, exclusive content, viral challenges, all designed to pressure you into action before you can reflect. And in the background, there's always the algorithm, learning from every choice you make, sculpting your digital reality like a god behind the curtain. So, how do you resist? Start by recognizing that your feed is not a reflection of the world. It's a mirror designed by machines to keep you hooked. If something makes you feel overly emotional, question it. If a post seems too perfect, too relatable, too urgent, pause, ask, is this for me, or is it being done to me? Curate your content with intention. Break the cycle by following diverse voices. Turn off notifications, reclaim silence, practice digital fasting. Most importantly, rebuild the habit of real, unfiltered connection with yourself and with others. Because the less time you spend in the puppet theater, the harder it is for the strings to find you. In the end, the most terrifying manipulations aren't the ones shouted in your face. They're the ones whispered quietly behind glass from the palm of your hand. Up next, in Chapter 19, we'll explore the dark psychology behind framing reality, how manipulators use storytelling, narrative control, and reframing techniques to shift perception and rewrite truth itself. Chapter 19. Framing reality. The power of storytelling and narrative control. Reality is not a fixed object. It bends, warps, and reshapes itself, depending on who is telling the story and how. Every dictator, cult leader, politician, narcissist, and manipulator throughout history has known one truth: control the story, and you control the world. Welcome to the sinister power of framing, a method so subtle, so insidious, that most victims don't even realize it's happening. Because manipulation through storytelling doesn't rely on lies. It relies on perspective, and perspective is everything. Think of your mind as a stage. What you see, what you hear, and what you feel are all props arranged by the storyteller. A manipulator doesn't need to change the facts. They just need to decide which facts to show and how to show them. This is framing, and it's one of the most powerful tools in dark psychology. Let's begin with a simple example. Imagine a man walks into a room and slams the door. You're told he's angry. Suddenly, his behavior seems threatening. But what if you're told instead that he's grieving a loss? The same action, slamming the door, takes on a completely different meaning. That's the power of framing. It defines interpretation, and interpretation shapes belief. Manipulators use framing constantly. In arguments, they shift blame by telling half the story. I only yelled because you provoked me. In workplaces, toxic leaders reframe exploitation as loyalty. We're a family here. In abusive relationships, cruelty is dressed up as concern. I'm doing this because I love you. It's not about facts. It's about the lens those facts are viewed through. Now take this concept and scale it. Media organizations, political parties, corporations, they all engage in narrative control. They decide what's news and what isn't. They shape public perception not by what they say, but by what they omit. Two people can watch the same event, but come away with entirely different realities depending on how the story was told. This is how tribalism is born. When every group, every ideology, every influencer frames the world through their own curated lens, truth becomes subjective. Logic gives way to identity. And once people are emotionally invested in a particular narrative, they'll defend it, no matter how absurd it becomes. Storytelling doesn't just manipulate groups, it manipulates the self. Think of the inner narratives we carry. I'm not good enough. People always leave me. If I fail, I'll be worthless. These are not facts. These are internal stories, many of which were planted by manipulators during childhood, relationships, or trauma. We repeat them so often, they harden into belief. But they're still just stories, and manipulators know how to plant new ones. One of the most sinister tactics is reframing abuse as growth. A toxic mentor may say, "I push you because I believe in your potential." A jealous partner might claim, "I only get upset because I care so much." A manipulative parent reframes emotional neglect as teaching independence. Over time, victims internalize these narratives and even defend their abusers, because the story makes sense. Let's go deeper. Gaslighting, perhaps the most iconic tool of dark psychology, is entirely about narrative control. It doesn't require yelling or threats. It requires rewriting the past, reshaping the present, and distorting the future. You're remembering it wrong. You always exaggerate. You're too sensitive. These are not attacks. They're edits to your story. And if done consistently, you begin to question your own plotline. The abuser becomes the author. And you? You're just a character. Even when the manipulation ends, the frame often stays. Survivors of manipulation don't just carry pain, they carry stories that continue to shape how they view the world. The tragedy is that many never realize those stories weren't theirs to begin with. So how do you protect yourself? Start by questioning who is telling the story and why. Ask what's being left out. Whose voice is missing? Who benefits from this version of events? When you feel an emotional reaction, fear, guilt, shame, pause and ask, is this truth? Or is this just a well-crafted story? And then ask an even harder question. What story am I telling myself? Because the mind is not just a sponge. It's a storyteller in its own right. And the stories you accept become the architecture of your identity, your beliefs, your fears, your limits. In a world overflowing with narratives, the most dangerous thing you can do is stop questioning them. In the next chapter, we'll go even further into the abyss as we explore the Manipulator's Playbook, a deep dive into how all these techniques are orchestrated together like a psychological symphony. From seduction to domination, from confusion to control, we'll decode how master manipulators craft entire realities, step by calculated step. Chapter 20. The Manipulator's Playbook. The full sequence of psychological control. In every psychological battlefield, the most dangerous enemy is not the one who shouts commands, but the one who whispers illusions. The skilled manipulator doesn't simply use one tactic. They orchestrate a sequence, a psychological ballet of charm, confusion, dependency, and submission. What may seem like scattered behavior is, in truth, a step-by-step blueprint for domination. Welcome to the Manipulator's Playbook. Every manipulator has their own variation, but the core framework tends to follow a chillingly predictable path. And once you understand this progression, you'll begin to see it everywhere, from toxic relationships to authoritarian regimes. Let's begin with step 1, idealization. The manipulator starts with admiration, not of themselves, but of you. You are everything they've ever wanted. You're beautiful, brilliant, misunderstood. You share the same beliefs, the same trauma, the same enemies. This is not coincidence, it is design. They mirror you. They listen intently. They finish your sentences. In a matter of days, weeks, or hours, you feel like you've met a soulmate, a mentor, or a savior. This phase is intoxicating, but it is never sincere. It is bait. Step 2. Rapid intimacy. The manipulator speeds up the emotional clock. Suddenly, you're sharing secrets, dreams, fears. You skip the slow build of trust. Boundaries are erased. We just connect, you say. It feels like I've known them forever. That's exactly what they want. Because the faster the bond is formed, the easier it is to twist. Once you are emotionally entangled, we move to step 3, subtle testing. They poke at your boundaries, not to break them, but to see where they are. A joke that feels off, a question that's too personal, a comment that makes you flinch. They watch your response. If you resist, they retreat, charming again, apologizing. But if you don't, they push further. Step by step, discomfort becomes normal. And then, you've entered step 4. Devaluation. The very qualities they once praised begin to be criticized. Your independence becomes selfishness. Your friends are suddenly bad influences. Your dreams are unrealistic. But it's not always blatant. Sometimes it's wrapped in concern. I just want what's best for you. Other times it's disguised as humor. Relax, I'm just kidding. But the message is clear. You are flawed, and they are the only one who sees it. Then comes step 5. Confusion. Contradictions emerge. Their moods swing. Their words and actions don't align. You start to feel like you're always doing something wrong, but you don't know what. One day they're warm, the next cold. They punish and reward unpredictably. This inconsistency is not chaos, it's a control mechanism. You begin to chase their approval. You work harder to please them. You apologize for things you didn't do. You analyze every word, every glance. You become addicted to the emotional roller coaster. By now, you're deep in step 6, isolation. This doesn't mean you're physically locked away. It means your world has shrunk. You talk less to friends. You avoid your family. You stop sharing your thoughts with others. Why? Because the manipulator has either driven them away, discredited them, or made you feel ashamed. You begin to rely entirely on the manipulator for reality, for validation, for love. And that's when step 7, control, begins. Now the manipulator dictates how you should think, feel, behave. They correct your memories. They tell you what's real. They monitor your choices, sometimes overtly, sometimes through guilt. If you loved me, you'd do this. Why do you always ruin things? The walls close in, not physically, but mentally. And then comes step 8, dependency. This is the end game. You no longer feel safe, smart, or strong without them. You doubt your instincts. You fear being alone. You justify their behavior. You start to believe their version of you. Weak, lucky to have them, incapable on your own. This is the point where many people stay, trapped by trauma bonds, shame, and self-doubt. But even this isn't the end, because manipulators often cycle back. After a particularly cruel episode, they return with step 9, redemption, apologies, tears, gifts, grand gestures. I know I messed up. Let's start over. I'll change. This reset rekindles hope. It makes you think maybe, just maybe, things will get better. And for a while they do, but only so the cycle can begin again, with deeper hooks, tighter chains. This entire sequence, idealization, intimacy, testing, devaluation, confusion, isolation, control, dependency, and redemption, is not always conscious. Some manipulators learn it through experience. Others inherit it from abusive systems or cultures. But the result is the same, total psychological control. Now let's pause. You may be thinking, why would anyone fall for this? Because this playbook doesn't target the weak. It targets the kind, the loyal, the hopeful, the emotionally open. Manipulators prey on empathy, not ignorance. They know how to speak the language of love, pain, healing, and growth. And they know how to use that language as a leash. So how do you escape it? Not by arguing, not by reasoning, but by seeing the pattern. Once you recognize the structure, the spell begins to break. When you can name each step, see it unfolding in real time, you reawaken the part of yourself they worked so hard to silence. You begin to reclaim your story. There's one final twist in the Manipulator's playbook. They often play the victim. When cornered, they flip the narrative. You're the abuser. You betrayed them. This tactic, called DAVO, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender, confuses everyone watching. Friends, co-workers, even therapists may be fooled. And the cycle begins again, this time with others defending your abuser. But now you see it. You know the blueprint. You've read the script. And once you know the playbook, you can no longer be a pawn. In the next chapter, we'll take a hard look at how to break free, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually, from the grip of manipulators. Whether it's a partner, a parent, a boss, or even the inner voice, shaped by years of abuse, liberation begins with knowledge and ends with resistance. Chapter 21. Breaking the Chains. How to escape the grip of a manipulator. Escape is never simple, not from a psychological prison, not from someone who knows your deepest wounds, who's studied your triggers, who's mastered the art of making you doubt yourself. Leaving a manipulator isn't just about walking away. It's about rebuilding the very foundation of your reality. You may have heard people say, just leave. But those words come from a place of privilege, a place that's never lived. Inside the storm, when you're entangled with a manipulator, your mind is no longer entirely your own. That's what makes escape so difficult. It's not just the door that's locked, it's your perception of the key. So, how do you break free? Step 1. Acknowledge the illusion. The first and hardest part is recognizing that you've been manipulated at all. It feels like betrayal of them, of yourself. You might ask, was I really fooled? Did I allow this? Am I weak? The truth is, none of those questions matter. Manipulation works because it bypasses logic. It's not about intelligence, it's about emotional exploitation. You can be strong, smart, and kind, and still be caught in a manipulator's web. So stop blaming yourself. Blame the deception. Blame the control. Blame the pattern. Because if you don't, you'll never see the trap clearly. Step 2. Name the tactics. Clarity begins with language. Once you can name what's happening, gaslighting, love bombing, triangulation, you begin to take back mental ground. Each term becomes a weapon, not of attack, but of defense. Every label shines a spotlight on the manipulator's methods and starts dissolving their power. For example, the next time they say, "You're remembering it wrong," you don't fall into self-doubt. You silently whisper, "Gaslighting." When they switch from cruelty to affection, you don't see hope. You see trauma bonding. With each named tactic, you reclaim a piece of your sanity. Step 3. Document the madness. One of the most disorienting effects of manipulation is memory erosion. You're constantly second-guessing what actually happened. To fight this, you need evidence, not for the world, but for yourself. Keep a private journal. Record conversations, behaviors, contradictions. These aren't just notes, they're anchors, proof that your mind isn't broken, that your intuition was right. When the manipulator tries to rewrite the past, your records will whisper, "No. I remember." Step 4. Build a support system, quietly. Manipulators isolate for a reason. They know that outside voices bring clarity, so your first act of rebellion is connection. Reconnect with old friends. Confide in people you trust, but be cautious. The manipulator may have already poisoned your reputation. They may monitor your communication. So rebuild your tribe slowly, quietly, and wisely. And if no one around you understands, seek professional help. A therapist trained in emotional abuse can be a lifeline, not to fix you, but to remind you that you were never broken. Step 5. Break the psychological bond. This is the heart of escape, not physical distance, but emotional detachment. You may still care about the manipulator. You may still love them. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But love must be redefined. Because love without safety isn't love. It's survival dressed in fantasy. To break the bond, you must stop looking for closure from them. They will never give it. They will confuse you, bait you, apologize just enough to keep you hooked. You must become your own closure. Accept the pain. Accept the loss. Accept that the version of them you loved never really existed. Step 6. Go no contact or grey rock. If possible, cut off all communication. Block their number. Delete their messages. Avoid shared spaces. If you have to maintain contact due to children, work, or family, use the grey rock method. Be boring, unreactive, emotionally neutral. Don't feed them drama. Don't explain yourself. Don't seek validation. They thrive on your response. Starve them of it. Every time you don't react, you take back control. Step 7. Expect withdrawal. Breaking away from manipulation feels like detox. You'll experience withdrawal, emotional, physical, even spiritual. You may feel empty, anxious, guilt-ridden. You may miss them intensely. That's normal. You've been conditioned to associate their presence with your self-worth. Like any addiction, healing requires time, distance, and self-compassion. Let the storm pass. Don't run back just to escape the silence. The silence is where your voice starts to return. Step 8. Reclaim your identity. Who were you before the manipulation? What did you love? What made you laugh? What dreams did you bury to please them? Now is the time to remember. Revisit your hobbies. Redefine your beliefs. Rebuild your routines. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You need to rediscover yourself. The version of you that was hidden under their control is still there. Waiting. Breathing. Hoping. Each small act of autonomy, choosing your clothes, your meals, your music, becomes an act of rebellion. Each step is sacred. Step 9. Learn without bitterness. It's easy to become cynical after surviving manipulation. To see everyone as a threat. To build walls so high that nothing gets through. But if you do that, they still win. The manipulator didn't just want to control you. They wanted to shape how you see the world. Don't let them succeed. Yes, be wiser. Yes, trust slower. But don't abandon kindness. Don't abandon love. The goal is to protect your heart, not to bury it. Let your scars become teachers, not jailers. Step 10. Help others see. Once you've escaped, once you've healed, you carry a new kind of light, a dangerous light. Because now you can expose the darkness. You can spot manipulation from a distance. You can speak the words others don't yet have. You become the very thing the manipulator feared, someone who knows their playbook and isn't afraid to burn it. So share your story, quietly or loudly, in conversations, in art, in silence. Every time you name manipulation, you weaken its power in the world. You give others the courage to see and to leave. There's one final truth to remember. You were always enough. The manipulator didn't choose you because you were weak. They chose you because you were bright, because you were empathetic, because your heart was open. They needed your light to feed their shadow. But the light is yours. And now, it's time to take it back. Chapter 22. Dark Psychology in Leadership and Politics. The power behind the curtain. Power is rarely taken by brute force anymore. It's taken with words, with imagery, with fear, with charisma dressed in concern. In the modern world, true, manipulation isn't happening in alleyways or behind closed doors. It's happening on screens, behind podiums, and in the minds of millions. Welcome to the theatre of power, where dark psychology isn't just a tool, it's the entire script. Every major political shift, every uprising, every collapse of reason has a puppeteer somewhere in the wings, someone who knows how to push collective buttons, someone who understands that facts don't move people, emotions do. And this chapter reveals exactly how they do it. Most charismatic leaders don't start with credentials. They start with narrative. They construct an identity, a story that taps directly into the fears and desires of the masses. They don't say, "I have a plan." They say, "I am one of you." And that simple shift of becoming a mirror to the crowd is the first hook. They exploit shared pain, economic struggle, cultural loss, national insecurity, and they promise not just solutions, but salvation. These leaders often paint themselves as the only one who can fix it, creating an illusion of indispensability. Any opposition becomes betrayal. Any doubt becomes disloyalty. Over time, this psychological dependency calcifies. The leader is no longer evaluated. They are worshipped. This isn't leadership. It's psychological colonization. In the hands of a manipulative leader, fear becomes the perfect instrument. It bypasses logic. It immobilizes people into obedience. The message is simple. You're in danger, and only I can protect you. The danger doesn't even need to be real. It only needs to feel real. Immigrants, foreign nations, disease, economic, collapse. The others. The manipulator crafts enemies, both visible and invisible, to sustain a constant state of anxiety. And in that anxiety, people give up rights, freedoms, even empathy, not because they're evil, but because they've been made to feel unsafe. Fear turns democracies into dictatorships without firing a single shot. Dark psychology thrives in pseudo-democracies, where the illusion of choice masks a rigged game. Manipulative leaders allow criticism, but only of the kind they can control. They create controlled opposition, false debates, and distractions to maintain power while pretending to uphold freedom. They flood the information space with noise, contradictions, and false equivalences. Truth becomes impossible to locate. In that fog, people give up trying. They surrender their discernment to the loudest voice in the room, the one that sounds most confident. This is informational warfare, and it doesn't need bullets to kill reason. At the center of most political manipulation is the classic narcissist, grandiose, entitled, lacking empathy, and obsessed with loyalty. They demand admiration, not just for what they do, but for who they are. Any criticism becomes a personal attack. They cannot be wrong. And to ensure compliance, they surround themselves with sycophants, people who mirror their views, validate their delusions, and eliminate dissent. In time, the entire system reflects their pathology. But here's the terrifying part. These leaders often believe their own lies. They're not just manipulating others, they're manipulating themselves. And in that delusion, they become even more dangerous because they feel righteous. Propaganda isn't dead, it's evolved. Today, it wears hashtags. It lives in memes. It masquerades as news, and it's algorithmically amplified. Manipulators understand the human brain craves stories over statistics, so they flood the public with emotionally charged narratives. Repeated so often, they become indistinguishable from truth. It's not about censorship anymore. It's about saturation. Say a lie once, it's questioned. Say it 1,000 times, it becomes memory. Say it 1,000,000 times, it becomes identity. Manipulators in power don't unify, they fragment. The more divided a population is, politically, racially, economically, the easier it is to control. So they stir division on purpose. They pit neighbor against neighbor. They exaggerate differences. They make compromise feel like weakness. And while the people fight each other, the manipulator strengthens their grip. Division is not a byproduct, it's the plan. Throughout history, people have gravitated towards strongman leaders during times of uncertainty. Why? Because chaos breeds desperation, and desperation craves certainty, even if it's cruel. Manipulators capitalize on this by portraying themselves as unyielding, harsh, dominant, the alpha. They bully opponents, dismiss critics, brag about strength, and in doing so, they trigger a primal instinct in the public, a longing for the protective parent figure who will make things right. But what they're actually offering is obedience, not order. When manipulation becomes systemic, it births something darker, the cult of personality. In these scenarios, the leader becomes mythologized. Their image appears in schools, newspapers, buildings. They are not just a person, they are a symbol, untouchable, infallible. And when a leader becomes a symbol, they become immune to accountability. Criticizing them becomes heresy. Dissent becomes treason. The people don't just fear them, they believe in them. This is the final stage of political manipulation, when people surrender not just their rights, but their minds. So how do you resist? Not by shouting louder, not by playing their game, but by becoming psychologically literate. Understand the tactics, recognize the triggers. Ask, is this fact or just fear with a headline? Is this policy or performance? Manipulators thrive on emotional reactivity. So refuse to give it. Stay grounded, stay curious. Educate others, not to argue, but to awaken. And above all, don't idolize anyone. Not leaders, not parties, not movements. Every human is fallible. Every institution must be questioned. Loyalty without scrutiny is how tyranny blooms. We live in a world where manipulation has gone mainstream, where charm is weaponized, where truth is diluted. But if you can see the script, you don't have to be part of the play. And if enough people see it, the theatre collapses. Chapter 23, The Manipulator's Playbook. Why good people fall for it. What if I told you that the people who fall for manipulation the most aren't weak? That in fact, the most compassionate, empathetic, and loving individuals are often the primary targets. Because the final truth of dark psychology is this: manipulation works not because people are foolish, but because they are human. And in this final chapter, we reveal why. Empathy is often seen as a virtue, the ability to feel what others feel, to offer understanding, even when it's undeserved. But for manipulators, empathy isn't something to admire. It's a chink in your armor. Empaths want to help, to fix, to rescue. They want to believe the best in people. And this makes them easy to guilt, easy to shame, and easy to trap. A skilled manipulator doesn't need to overpower you. They just need to make you feel responsible for their pain. You made me angry. If you leave, I'll fall apart. No one else understands me like you do. And so, you stay, you give, you forgive. Not because you're blind, but because you care. One of the greatest tools in the manipulator's arsenal is hope. They promise to change, they cry, they beg. They tell you how broken they are and how you're the only one who can help them become better. And because you're kind, you believe them. You hold on to glimpses of the person they used to be. Or moments when things felt real. You think, maybe I can help them heal. And before you know it, you're sacrificing your own well-being for the fantasy of their redemption. This is how hope becomes a prison. No one falls into deep manipulation overnight. It's a slow erosion, one boundary at a time, one excuse at a time. First, it's a little lie, then a small demand, then a mood swing, then an apology. Over time, you adjust, you rationalize, you minimize, until one day you look in the mirror and you barely recognize who you are anymore. That's how real manipulation works. It doesn't break you in one blow. It wears you down grain by grain until resistance feels impossible. Many manipulators begin by mirroring you, your words, your values, your dreams. It's like meeting your soulmate or the perfect friend. You think, finally, someone who gets me. But they're not showing you who they are. They're showing you reflected back. And once you've emotionally invested. Once your guard is down, they start to shift. The warmth turns cold, the connection becomes conditional. But by then, you've bonded with the person you thought they were, not the one they really are. You're not holding on to a relationship. You're holding on to a reflection. When you're manipulated long enough, something breaks inside. Not loudly, quietly, internally. You begin to doubt your memory, your perception, your worth. You hear their voice in your own thoughts. You're too sensitive. You always ruin things. No one else would love you. Over time, the manipulator doesn't need to gaslight you anymore. You do it yourself. This is what makes escape so difficult. Because even if the manipulator disappears, the self-doubt remains. People often ask, why don't victims just leave? But that question ignores the most important part. Most manipulated people don't know they're being manipulated. They think they're in love. They think they're helping. They think they're choosing. And the manipulator wants it that way, because control only works when it doesn't feel like control. Cognitive dissonance is the psychological discomfort we feel when reality contradicts our beliefs. You believe someone loves you, but they hurt you. You believe you're strong, but you feel trapped. You believe in honesty, but you're living in secrets. To resolve this tension, the brain takes shortcuts. It rewrites the narrative. They didn't mean it. It's my fault. This is just a phase. Manipulators rely on this mental glitch, because the more you twist the truth to preserve your reality, the more entangled you become in theirs. The reason dark psychology is so terrifying is because it works on good people, people who want connection, people who want peace, people who don't want to believe that someone they love is capable of calculated harm. But the only way to stop being manipulated is to understand the mechanics of manipulation. When you learn the patterns, you stop taking it personally. You stop thinking you are the problem. You stop trying to fix someone who never intended to change. You start seeing clearly. And when you see clearly, you can walk away without shame. This journey we've taken, from gaslighting to trauma bonding, from political manipulation to romantic mind games, has not been easy. But it has been necessary, because in a world where manipulation hides in plain sight, awareness is a radical act of self-defense. The truth is, you can heal. You can rebuild. You can reclaim your voice, your agency, your sense of self. But first, you must forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for not seeing it sooner, for staying too long, for believing too deeply, for loving someone who weaponized that love against you. You didn't fail. You didn't fall. You were simply human, and now you're something else. You're awake. You've reached the end of this journey into dark psychology, but this is just the beginning of seeing the world differently. If you found value in this, share it, not just to support the channel, but to help others see what they couldn't before. And remember, you're not weak for being manipulated. You're powerful for surviving it, and unstoppable now that you understand it. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and stay alert. Because in a world built on illusion, clarity is your sharpest weapon.